You walked into the room and you already knew. Before anyone said a word, before the conversation started, before there was any obvious evidence of what was actually happening, you knew. You knew who was performing. You knew who was in pain underneath the confidence. You knew that the couple sitting together were not really together. You knew that the person laughing the loudest was the most afraid. Because you have learned, over many years, through many difficult experiences, that saying what you see is not always welcome. That the accuracy of your perception does not protect you from the social cost of being the one who sees it. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called the intuitive type, the person for whom knowledge arrives not through analysis, not through sensation, not through the careful accumulation of evidence, but whole, complete, arrived at without a traceable path, known before it can be explained. Jung believed this was not guessing. He believed it was one of the four fundamental functions of human consciousness, as valid, as real, as reliable as the thinking function that our rational culture has spent centuries elevating above everything else. This film is about what it means to be that person, to see what others don't, to carry that seeing, and to finally understand it not as a burden, but as what it actually is. Let us be precise about what we are describing, because the phrase, seeing what others don't, is easy to misunderstand, easy to romanticize, easy to dismiss, easy to confuse with something more mystical than it actually is. What the highly perceptive person does is not supernatural. It is the natural human capacity for reading social and emotional information, the capacity every human being has, operating at a significantly higher degree of sensitivity and precision than most people experience. Dr. Paul Ekman spent decades studying what he called micro-expressions, the involuntary split-second facial movements that reveal genuine emotion before the conscious mind has had time to manage the presentation. The highly perceptive person catches them without trying, not because they are deliberately looking, but because their nervous system has been calibrated through a combination of biology and early experience to register exactly that kind of signal. They catch the micro-expression of contempt that flashed across someone's face for a fraction of a second before the smile returned. They notice that the person who said everything is fine hesitated for exactly half a beat before saying it. They register the way someone's body subtly oriented away from them in a conversation, even while the words being said were perfectly friendly. They sense the emotional temperature of a room the moment they enter it, not as a vague feeling, but as specific, actionable information. This person is nervous. That person is angry and hiding it. There is something unresolved between those two that has not been acknowledged yet, and they are almost always right. This is what makes the experience simultaneously extraordinary and exhausting. Extraordinary because the information they have access to is genuinely more complete than what most people are working with. Exhausting because there is no off switch. The nervous system that is calibrated for this level of perception does not stop perceiving when the person wants to rest. It does not turn down the sensitivity in environments where that sensitivity produces more pain than insight. It keeps registering, keeps reading, keeps picking up signals that the person would sometimes give anything to miss. And here is the dimension that is least often discussed. The highly perceptive person does not only read what is happening in the people around them, they also read what those people are not showing. The grief underneath the competence, the loneliness underneath the popularity, the fear underneath the aggression, the need underneath the self-sufficiency. They see the person behind the person. And that seeing, however accurate, is not always a gift the people around them want received. Because being truly seen is one of the most intimate and most threatening experiences available to a human being. Most people manage their presentation precisely because they do not want to be seen that clearly. And the highly perceptive person disrupts that management simply by being in the room, which is why they are so often described by people who do not understand them as intense, as too much, as someone who makes you feel like they are looking right through you. They are, and they cannot help it. And the work of this film is to understand why and what to do with it. Carl Jung proposed that the human psyche organizes its relationship to the world through four fundamental functions: thinking, which processes information through logic, analysis, and reason. Feeling, which processes information through emotional resonance and values. Sensation, which processes information through the direct experience of the senses, the concrete and the tangible. And intuition, which Jung described as perception via the unconscious. The intuitive type does not arrive at knowledge through the accumulation of evidence. They arrive at it through a process that bypasses the conscious analytical mind, that draws on pattern recognition, on the vast unconscious store of processed experience, on something that functions so quickly and so completely that it appears, from the inside, simply as knowing. Jung was careful to distinguish this from mysticism. He was not describing psychic ability. He was describing a cognitive function, real, measurable in its effects, present in every human being to varying degrees, that operates beneath the threshold of conscious awareness. Modern neuroscience has caught up with what Jung observed. The research on what is called thin slicing, the brain's ability to make accurate judgments from very small amounts of information, confirms that human beings are capable of registering and processing social and emotional information at speeds far exceeding what conscious thought can manage. We know things before we know them. For most people, this capacity operates in the background, occasionally surfacing as a gut feeling, a sense of unease, an impression of someone that turns out to be accurate in ways they cannot explain. For the highly perceptive person, Jung's intuitive type, this capacity is the dominant mode. It is not the background, it is the foreground. The way sensation dominates for the person who is exquisitely attuned to physical experience, the texture, the temperature, the precise quality of every sensory input. Intuition dominates for the person who is exquisitely attuned to the hidden dimensions of human experience. What is really happening here? What is not being said? What this situation will become if the current trajectory continues? What this person is actually feeling beneath what they are performing? Jung observed something else that is worth naming directly. The intuitive type tends to be uncomfortable with the present, not because they are dissatisfied with their lives, though they sometimes are, but because their natural orientation is toward what is coming, what is possible, what lies beneath the surface of what currently exists. They are drawn to potential more than actuality, to what something could be more than what it is. This gives them an extraordinary capacity for vision, for anticipation, for sensing the direction in which things are moving before the movement becomes visible. And it also gives them a particular kind of difficulty with the ordinary. The highly perceptive, intuitive person often struggles with routine, with the mundane, with tasks that require sustained attention to the concrete and the immediate. Not because they are incapable, but because their mind is always simultaneously processing another layer of reality that most people cannot see. And navigating both, the surface and the depth, requires an expenditure of energy that the people around them rarely recognize or account for. Because from the outside, the highly perceptive person often looks simply like someone who is not quite paying attention, when in fact, they are paying more attention than anyone in the room, just not to what everyone else is paying attention to.
Let us talk about what this actually looks like in the daily life of someone who perceives at this depth. The highly perceptive person is rarely surprised by how things turn out. They usually saw it coming. The relationship that ended badly and unexpectedly for everyone else, they had been watching the signs for months. The colleague whose behavior suddenly became problematic, they had sensed the instability long before it became visible.
The friend who turned out not to be a friend, they had registered something in the first few interactions that they could not name then, but can name now. They are not prophets. They are people whose pattern recognition is operating on more data than most people collect. They also carry the particular burden of knowing things they were not supposed to know, and having nowhere to put that knowledge.
Because you cannot say to someone, I know you are unhappy in this marriage, even though you have not told anyone, without creating a situation that requires significant explanation. You cannot tell your friend, I could sense 3 conversations ago that something was wrong, without them wondering how you saw what they were working so hard to conceal. And so the highly perceptive person learns to hold what they see, to carry the knowledge quietly,
to wait for the moment when what they already knew becomes something they are allowed to name. This waiting, this holding, is one of the most exhausting dimensions of the experience. This is the experience of knowing and not being able to use the knowing, of seeing the cliff approaching in a car you are not driving. In relationships, the highly perceptive person often struggles with something that looks, from the outside, like jealousy or insecurity, but is actually something different.
They pick up on shifts in the emotional weather of their relationships long before those shifts become explicit. They notice when someone's attention has moved somewhere else, when the quality of presence in a conversation has changed, when something has shifted in the dynamic that the other person is not yet ready to acknowledge.
And because they cannot always explain what they are sensing, because the data they are working with is pre-verbal, somatic, registered in the nervous system rather than in the analytical mind, they often appear to others as unreasonably anxious, as seeing problems that are not there, as making something out of nothing, when in fact
They are making something out of everything. All the micro-signals, all the subtle shifts, all the information that is there but that most people are not equipped to read. And then the thing they sensed eventually becomes explicit. And they feel, not vindicated exactly, but something lonelier than that. The grief of someone who saw the wave coming and could not make anyone believe them until it arrived.
They also tend to be the person others come to when they need to understand something they cannot understand themselves. Because the highly perceptive person can often name what someone is feeling more accurately than the person experiencing the feeling can, which makes them extraordinarily valuable in close relationships and sometimes difficult to be close to. Because being that known, that accurately perceived, requires a level of vulnerability that most people find deeply uncomfortable. The highly perceptive person sees. And not everyone wants to be seen.
There is a physical dimension to perceiving at this depth that is almost never discussed, because the conversation about highly perceptive people tends to focus on the psychological, on the social experience, on the relational dynamics, on the cognitive gift and its costs. But the body pays a price too. The nervous system that is calibrated to register emotional and social information at this level of sensitivity is a nervous system that is chronically processing more input than the average nervous system manages. And chronic processing at elevated levels has physiological consequences. The highly perceptive person often experiences a specific kind of fatigue after social interactions, a depletion that goes beyond ordinary social tiredness. Because they were not just present in the interaction, they were processing the interaction at multiple levels simultaneously. The words being said and the words not being said, the emotions being shown and the emotions being concealed, the dynamic between the people in the room and the history underneath that dynamic, the trajectory of the conversation and what it was really about beneath what it appeared to be about. All of this simultaneously, without conscious effort, without choosing to, without the ability to turn it off. Peter Levine's work on the nervous system and its responses to overwhelm is relevant here. He described the nervous system's capacity for what he called completion, the process by which the activation generated by significant experience is discharged through the body rather than held in it. For the highly perceptive person whose nervous system is generating significant activation in response to the constant stream of social and emotional information it is processing, this completion is frequently interrupted because the environments they spend their time in rarely provide the space for that completion to occur. You cannot discharge the activation generated by sensing your colleague's grief in the middle of a meeting. You cannot complete the response generated by feeling the tension between two people at a dinner party while the dinner party is still happening. And so the activation accumulates, held in the body, stored as tension, as fatigue, as the particular exhaustion of a nervous system that has been running at elevated processing levels for an extended period. The highly perceptive person often needs significantly more time alone than the people around them understand. In fact, they often feel a profound and genuine love for the specific humans in their lives, a love that is deepened precisely by their capacity to see those people clearly. But because the time alone is when the nervous system can finally complete what the social environment did not allow it to complete. When the body can discharge what it has been holding. When the processing that was happening beneath the threshold of consciousness can surface and be integrated. This is not antisocial behavior. This is not a character flaw. It is the maintenance requirement of an extraordinarily sophisticated and extraordinarily demanding instrument. And the highly perceptive person who understands this about themselves, who builds in the time and space for this kind of recovery, functions significantly better in every dimension of their life than the one who does not. The body is not separate from the perception. It is where the perception lives, and it deserves the same quality of attention the perceptive person gives to everyone else. The question worth asking is this: why do some people perceive at this depth when others do not? The answer, as with so many of the patterns we explore in depth psychology, has two dimensions: one biological, one biographical. The biological dimension is real and should not be minimized. Research on the highly sensitive person, the trait Elaine Aron identified and spent decades studying, confirms that approximately 15 to 20% of the human population processes sensory and emotional information with significantly greater depth and breadth than average. This is a heritable trait. It is present in over 100 other species. It appears to have genuine evolutionary value, conferring advantages in environments that reward careful observation and nuanced social reading. Some people are simply born with nervous systems that register more. But the biographical dimension is equally important, and often more determining of how the perceptive capacity develops, whether it becomes a gift or a wound, and what relationship the person has with their own seeing. For many highly perceptive people, perhaps most, the sensitivity was intensified and the perception sharpened by early experiences that made accurate reading of the emotional environment a matter of psychological necessity. The child who grew up in an unpredictable household, where a parent's mood could shift without warning, where the emotional temperature of the environment changed rapidly and without clear cause. That child learned to read the room with extraordinary precision, simply to stay safe. Not safe in a dramatic sense necessarily, but safe in the ordinary sense that all children need. Knowing what is coming, knowing how to calibrate their behavior to the current emotional reality, knowing how to avoid the particular kind of pain that comes from misreading what is happening and responding to it incorrectly. The nervous system calibrates itself to the environment it inhabits. A child in an emotionally unpredictable environment calibrates toward heightened vigilance, toward hyper-awareness of subtle signals, toward the capacity to read what is not being said as much as what is. And that calibration, made in childhood, made before the child had words for it, made as a survival response to a specific environment, does not disappear when the environment changes. The adult who grew up that way carries that calibration with them into every relationship, into every workplace, into every social situation where the emotional undercurrents of the environment are available to be read. Automatically, immediately, without choosing to. This is where the gift and the wound become almost impossible to separate, because the same capacity that makes them extraordinary, that allows them to see what others miss, to understand what others cannot access, to hold space for the complexity of human experience with rare accuracy and care, is the capacity that was first developed in the service of survival, not in the service of connection, not in the service of understanding, not as an expression of a gift freely given, as a response to an environment that required it. And understanding that origin, clearly, without flinching, is part of what makes it possible to eventually inhabit the capacity differently. Not as a vigilance system still scanning for threat, but as the genuine gift it also, simultaneously, always was. Jung asked us always to look at the shadow, and the shadow of the perceptive gift is worth examining with the same honesty we would bring to any other. Because where there is a gift, and this is a genuine gift, there is almost always a shadow. And the shadow of seeing clearly is the assumption that what you see is the whole truth. The highly perceptive person is almost always right about what they sense, but almost always right is not always right. And the confidence that comes from a lifetime of accurate perception, from the repeated experience of sensing something, being told they were wrong, and then watching what they sensed become exactly what they knew it was. That confidence can become, over time, a kind of closed system, a way of interpreting the world that is very difficult to be argued out of. Not because the person is arrogant, though they can sometimes appear that way, but because their track record is genuinely good. And a good track record is a powerful argument for trusting your own perception. But perception, however refined, is still filtered through the self, through the history, through the wounds, through the patterns that were laid down in childhood, and that shape, even in the most self-aware person, what they look for, and therefore, what they find. The highly perceptive person who grew up in an environment where people were unreliable, where what was shown consistently differed from what was true, will look for that pattern everywhere they go. And because the pattern exists everywhere, because all human beings manage their presentations to some degree, they will find it. Even in people who are not actually hiding anything particularly significant. Even in relationships that are genuinely safe. The threat detector does not always distinguish between genuine concealment and ordinary privacy, between real danger and the ordinary complexity of a human being who has an interior life that they are not sharing. This can create a particular kind of suffering, the suffering of a person who is very good at seeing, but who sometimes sees what is there and what is not, who reads every hesitation as concealment, who interprets every shift in attention as the beginning of something ending, who cannot rest in the safety of a relationship because the perceptive capacity is always looking for what is being hidden. There is also a shadow in the way perception can be used. The person who sees clearly has access to information about other people that those people have not chosen to give. And that access can be used, consciously or not, in ways that serve the self at the expense of others. Reading someone's vulnerability to know how to manage them, using the knowledge of what someone needs to keep them close, deploying the accuracy of perception as a form of power in interpersonal dynamics. None of this is inevitable. Most highly perceptive people are people of genuine integrity who would be disturbed to recognize these patterns in themselves. But they are worth naming, because the shadow does not disappear simply because we do not look at it. And a highly perceptive person who is willing to examine not just what they see, but what their seeing is for, and what it sometimes costs the people they see so clearly, is the one doing the actual work. What does integration look like for the highly perceptive person? It begins, as it almost always does, with the origin, with understanding that the calibration of the nervous system, the sensitivity, the hyper-awareness, the constant background processing of social and emotional information began as a response to something, not as a freely chosen gift, not as a neutral trait that simply appeared one day, as a response to an environment that required it. And understanding that, really understanding it, in the body as well as the mind, begins to create some space between the perception and the person, between what the nervous system notices and what the person decides to do with what it notices. Because one of the great sufferings of the highly perceptive person is the sense that the perception is happening to them, that they have no agency in relation to it, that they cannot choose not to see what they see. And while it is true that the perception itself cannot be switched off, the nervous system will keep registering what it registers. What can change is the relationship to what is registered. The practice of what we might call strategic restraint, the deliberate choice not to act on every perception, is one of the most important skills available to the highly perceptive person. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every pattern that is perceived needs to be named. Not every concealment that is sensed needs to be investigated. Some things are not yours to see, even if you see them. Learning to hold that, to allow people their privacy, their management, their ordinary human complexity, without feeling compelled to either expose it or carry it, is a significant part of what maturity looks like for this particular type. The second dimension of integration is learning to trust the perception without being controlled by it, to use it as information rather than as verdict. The sense that something is wrong in a relationship is information worth taking seriously. It is not a verdict that the relationship is over. The perception of concealment in someone's behavior is information worth exploring. It is not a confirmed truth about who that person is. The intuitive hit, the whole knowing, the arrived at without evidence certainty, is worth listening to. And it is also worth testing, worth remaining curious about, rather than simply certain. This is the integration the thinking function offers to the intuitive type. Not the replacement of knowing with analysis, but the tempering of certainty with inquiry. The third dimension is finding the relationships and environments where the perception is not just tolerated, but genuinely welcomed. They exist. The creative fields where seeing beneath the surface is the entire point. The healing professions, where the capacity to perceive what is not being said is the most essential tool available. The relationships with people who are secure enough to be seen clearly, who do not experience accurate perception as a threat, who welcome being known with the same depth and precision the perceptive person brings to knowing. These people exist, and the highly perceptive person who finds them, who stops spending their seeing in places that punish it, discovers something extraordinary. That the capacity they have spent so much of their life managing and apologizing for is, in the right environment, the most valuable thing about them, and always was. You read people without trying to. You always have. You walked into rooms and knew things you were not supposed to know. You sensed the gap between what was being shown and what was actually true. You saw the person behind the performance. And for most of your life, you have been managing that, softening it, containing it, finding ways to be in the world without making everyone around you uncomfortable with how clearly you can see them. This film has been about why you see what you see, and what to do with the seeing. Not how to see less, but how to inhabit the capacity with more grace, more compassion, more discernment about where and how and for whom to offer what you perceive. Jung believed the privilege of a lifetime was to become who you truly are. For you, that means something specific. It means becoming someone who no longer apologizes for the clarity of their perception, who offers it freely, discerningly, generously, to the people and places worthy of receiving it. That is the work, and you are already doing it.